The microphone is heavier than I expected. Not physically. It's a standard wireless unit, foam-tipped, the kind they use at every hotel banquet hall from here to the coast. But when I close my fingers around it and pull it gently from my husband's hand, the weight of what I'm about to do settles into my palm like something I've been carrying for years without knowing it. The room goes quiet. 214 people. I'd counted the RSVPs myself because I handle details, are looking at me. Damien is still smiling, but his smile has developed a crack along one edge. His mother, Rosalind, sits at the head table with her hands folded, pearls catching the chandelier light, already composing her expression of wounded dignity. Between them and me is a distance of maybe 30 feet, and a truth they believed I would never speak aloud. The tablecloths are ivory. The centerpieces are white hydrangeas and eucalyptus. Everything in this room was chosen to look like the beginning of something beautiful. I bring the microphone to my lips. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales, where the quietest people in the room are always the most dangerous. If you're new here, I tell stories about what happens when patience runs out and the record finally gets set straight. Subscribe now. You'll want to be here for this. My name is Preethi Vasanthakumar Cole, and I am a forensic accountant. I say that not to impress you, but because it is the single most relevant fact about me for this story. I find things that are hidden in numbers. I reconstruct financial timelines from receipts, transfers, and the gaps between them. I have testified in federal court 4 times. I do not miss things. I am not easily confused. And I did not marry Damien Cole because I needed anything from him. I married him because for a brief and specific window of time, I believed he was someone different than who he turned out to be. His grandmother, Eula May Cole, was 81 years old when I met her. She lived in the back bedroom of Rosalind's house on Sycamore Trace Drive, and she had been living there, quietly and without complaint, for 11 years. She had her own bathroom, a small television, and a window that faced the garden she could no longer tend. She had been a high school mathematics teacher for 34 years. She had raised 3 children, largely alone, after her husband died of a cardiac event in 1987. The family talked about Eula the way people talk about furniture they've grown used to. Rosalind would say things like she's comfortable, or she doesn't need much, in a tone that made both statements sound like accomplishments she deserved credit for. The first time I visited, Eula was doing a crossword puzzle in pen. I sat with her for an hour. She told me about a student she'd had in 1974 who went on to chair a mathematics department at a university she named with quiet pride. She didn't tell me her own name until I asked. I started bringing her things. Specific things because she was specific. The Guardian crossword, not the Times. Earl Grey loose leaf, steeped exactly 4 minutes. A book of Gwendolyn Brooks' poems she'd mentioned once and never mentioned again, so I found it myself. Rosalind noticed. Her eyes moved between me and Eula like she was calculating something. The wedding was Damien's idea. The timeline, the venue, the scale. I wanted small. He said his family required a statement. I understood, by then, what kind of family produced that kind of sentence, but I had said yes and I intended to honor that. The engagement dinner was the first formal gathering. Rosalind hosted it at her house on Sycamore Trace, and the invitation came with conditions embedded so naturally into the conversation that it took me a moment to realize they were conditions. We just hope the ceremony reflects the family's values. We've always done things a certain way. Damien's father left very specific wishes about family occasions. Damien's father, Gerald, had died 3 years prior. He came up in almost every sentence Rosalind spoke, deployed like a legal citation. I accepted the dinner for Eula's sake. She called me the Thursday before and said, in her precise, unhurried way, "I'm glad you'll be there, Preethi. It gets loud sometimes, and loud is easier when there's someone calm nearby." That was the first of her 3 sentences that I will carry as long as I live. At the dinner, I watched Eula move through her own family like a visitor. She asked for water twice before anyone brought it. She started to tell a story about Gerald as a child, a warm story, a good one, and Rosalind talked over her with a toast. Eula set her glass down and said nothing. Her hands were very still. Damien's brother, Fletcher, made a joke about Eula's crosswords, something about at least she's keeping the brain busy, and everyone laughed, including Damien. Eula smiled, but it was the kind of smile that costs something. I didn't laugh. I found her eyes across the table and held them for a moment. She looked at me like she recognized something. The prenuptial agreement Rosalind mentioned casually after dessert. Just paperwork. The family's attorney drew it up, nothing alarming. I took home and read line by line. I marked 7 items in red. I did not mention this to Damien. I signed a version. Mine, drafted by my own attorney, Constance Obi, who charged $440 an hour, and was worth every cent. The wedding was a Saturday in October, the kind of cold that hadn't committed yet, where the morning was sharp and the afternoon softened into gold. 214 people in the ballroom of the Harwick Hotel, 22 miles outside the city. Eula was at the table closest to the exit, which I had not arranged. I noticed this during the reception and went to her first, before Damien's business partners, before the photographers, before anyone. She was wearing a blue dress the color of the sky about an hour before dark. And she had done her own hair, which she'd mentioned was harder now with her left hand. She took both of mine and said, "You look like you know exactly what you're doing." I said I was hoping so. The speeches began at 7. Fletcher spoke first, too long, too loud, a series of anecdotes that centered Fletcher. Then Rosalind. She was polished and practiced and she spoke for 11 minutes. And in those 11 minutes she said Damien's name 23 times and Eula's name 0 times. Then Damien took the microphone. He was glowing in the way that people glow when they believe the room belongs to them. He thanked his mother. He thanked Fletcher. He thanked, with a spreading smile and a sideward glance at his mother, the family for making sure the future is secure. He said, "Mom gets everything. The house, the accounts, the trust, all of it. Plus $6,000 a month. Indexed to inflation. We made sure of that." He said it like a love letter. He said it like a gift. He was looking at Rosalind when he said it, and she was looking at me. And what lived in her face in that moment was not warmth. It was a notification. I knew what the trust contained. I had known for 4 months. I stood up. Damien blinked. I crossed the 30 feet between us and I put out my hand. And because 214 people were watching and he didn't know what else to do, he gave me the microphone. "Actually," I said, "let's talk about the trust." Somewhere behind me, one of Damien's cousins, a young woman named Blythe, maybe 22, made a small sound. She almost said something. Her mouth opened. Then she looked at her mother and closed it. I understood. I didn't blame her. But I was no longer willing to be the person who closed her mouth. "Eula," I said, "would you come up here?" She came. Slowly, with her cane in her blue dress. And the room was quiet in the way that rooms get quiet when they understand something is ending. I handed her the microphone and said, "Go ahead, Mama." A word I had never said to her before, but that arrived in my mouth feeling already used, already worn in. Eula looked at me. Then at the room. Then she said, quietly and without drama, "I built that trust. Me and Gerald. 30 years. Then I took the microphone back, and I told them the rest. We left together. Eula and I, through the side door near the kitchen, where the catering staff was stacking dessert plates and a man in a white jacket was washing his hands at a steel sink. He looked up as we passed. He didn't say anything. Neither did we. Damien did not follow us immediately. There were social costs to following immediately, and Damien always calculated social costs. I had booked a room at the Harwick under my maiden name, Vasanthakumar, which Rosalind had been mispronouncing for 2 years, and Eula and I ordered room service and watched a documentary about migratory birds. She ate half a grilled cheese sandwich and drank her tea and fell asleep in the chair by the window around 9:30. I sat at the small desk with my laptop and began to draft the filing. In my bag, in a manila folder that had been there for 4 months, was a document I had not yet shown anyone. I had carried it to the engagement dinner. I had carried it to every family gathering since. I had carried it to my own wedding. It was worn soft at the fold lines from how many times I had handled it, confirming what I already knew. I never opened it in front of anyone. I just needed to know it was there. Damien called at 11. I let it ring. Rosalind called at 11:40. I let it ring. Fletcher called at midnight with a voicemail that was meant to sound reasonable. He said everyone needs to take a breath and come back to the table. Nobody meant any harm. Granny's fine. This is fixable. The word granny, which none of them had ever used to her face, caught in me like a splinter. I did not call back. The weeks after were logistics, which I am good at. I moved into my apartment on Carver Street, which I had maintained throughout the marriage because I handle details. I put Eula in the second bedroom. I bought her a new chair for the window, wider with better armrests, and I found her a crossword subscription, The Guardian, and I set her tea timer for 4 minutes. She taught me to make her mother's sweet potato pie. We did it on a Sunday afternoon in early November, the kitchen smelling of cinnamon and brown butter. Eula standing at the counter with her left hand braced against the edge and her right hand guiding mine through the filling. More nutmeg than you think you need, she said. That's the secret. More than seems right. If you're watching this and wondering whether she made it to the resolution, whether she was in the room when everything came undone, I need to tell you now that she wasn't. Eula died on the 14th of February. Quietly, in the chair by the window, with the crossword in her lap and her tea gone cold beside her. The doctor said her heart had been working harder than it should have for years. I had known this. She had known this. We had not talked about it in words, but we had talked about it in other ways. In the crosswords I brought, in the tea I made, in the November Sunday when she stood at my counter and taught me the thing about the nutmeg. If you're still with me, if this story is finding you at the right moment, please subscribe to Calm Revenge Tales, because the next part is why she trusted me with what she knew, and she deserves for it to be witnessed. The letter from Constance Obi arrived in March. Rosalind received hers the same morning. Damien received his. Fletcher received his. The family attorney, a man named Gideon Farr who had worked for Gerald Cole for 20 years before his widow inherited his services, received a notice that he would need to appear. The meeting happened in a conference room at Constance's firm. Pale wood table, 8 chairs, a window that looked out at nothing in particular. Rosalind came in a charcoal blazer composed. Damien sat beside her. Fletcher arrived 6 minutes late and didn't apologize. I sat on the other side of the table alone. I set the manila folder on the table between us. I did not open it yet. Constance outlined the findings. Gerald Cole's original trust document, dated 2004, established Eula May Cole as the primary beneficiary of a $1.4 million estate. The home on Sycamore Trace, 3 investment accounts totaling $880,000, and a structured disbursement of $6,000 per month. The figure Damien had announced at the wedding. The very number. Except the recipient was never Rosalind. The amendment Rosalind had filed in 2019, for months after Gerald's death, had been prepared by Gideon Farr. It had been executed with Eula's signature. Constance placed a forensic handwriting analysis on the table, $3,200 which I had paid, concluding that the signature on the 2019 amendment did not match Eula's signature on 12 other verified documents from the same period. Fletcher said that's insane. Not calmly. Rosalind said nothing. But she looked at Gideon Farr, and Gideon Farr looked at his hands, and that look between them contained an entire history that the room could now read. Damien said, Preethi, we can discuss this privately. His voice had a quality I had not heard before. Not anger, not calculation. Something closer to vertigo. I said, Gerald left Eula the house she helped him pay for and the money she helped him save. She told me once that she never asked for anything in writing because she trusted her son. I opened the manila folder and placed it in the center of the table. This is the letter Gerald wrote her in 2003, the year before he formalized the trust. He addresses her as the reason any of this exists. I've had it since November. Rosalind looked at the letter. Her composure didn't shatter. It deflated slowly, like something losing pressure from a small hole. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. It was the most human I had ever seen her, and I noted it, and I did not use it. You've had that since November, she said. Yes. Her hands went very still on the table. The estate was returned in full. administered through Eula's surviving wishes as documented in her own will, which she had prepared with Constance in January. The house on Sycamore Trace was sold at $612,000. The investment accounts were liquidated and distributed to 3 institutions Eula had named: a mathematics scholarship fund at her former school, a literacy program she'd volunteered with for 15 years, and a small grant in perpetuity for teachers in financial hardship. The $6,000 monthly disbursement, Damien's centerpiece, his proof of love, the number he'd announced to 214 people as a declaration of loyalty, had been Eula's money. Every payment Rosalind had received for 4 years was documented, calculated, and subject to a civil recovery action that Constance filed on a Tuesday morning in April. Rosalind's attorney negotiated. The terms were not generous, but they were legal and they were documented and they were done. Before the final filing, I made one call. To Rosalind directly. I told her that I was prepared to recommend a reduced recovery figure. Not zero, but reduced. If she would provide a full accounting of the funds received and sign an acknowledgement of the original trust's intent. It was not mercy disguised as strategy. It was genuine. I had watched her sit with Eula at Christmas dinners for 11 years, and I knew there had been, somewhere underneath the calculation, something that was once a real relationship. She hung up. So we proceeded. Gideon Farr surrendered his license. Damien and I finalized our dissolution in June. Fletcher, I understand, no longer practices the kind of business he was practicing. Though that is not my doing and not my story. Blythe, the cousin who almost spoke at the wedding, sent me a card in May. Just her name signed inside, nothing written. I kept it. I still live on Carver Street. The second bedroom is a study now. The chair by the window is still there, the wide one with the good armrests, because I haven't decided what to do with it yet, and I find I'm in no hurry. On Sundays I make sweet potato pie. I use more nutmeg than seems right. I have started eating it for breakfast sometimes, which Eula would have found pragmatic and slightly funny. The manila folder is in my desk drawer. Gerald's letter is still inside. I don't need to read it anymore. I have it more or less memorized, but I like knowing where it is. Some documents are not about information. They are about proof that a person existed in the specific and irreplaceable way that they did. Eula's last words to me were from the afternoon she taught me the pie. She was putting her coat on to go home from a daughter's visit, and she stopped in the doorway and looked at me with the precise, unhurried attention she gave to everything, and she said, "You knew. And you waited until it mattered. That's not patience. That's love." I have been turning that sentence over ever since. The way you turn something smooth and heavy in your hand when you're thinking. I think she was right. Some things cannot be taken from you, because they were never things to begin with. They were decisions, made quietly, accumulated over years, and when the moment came, you simply reached out your hand and let the room go still. If someone in your life is being made invisible, if there's someone sitting at the table closest to the exit, check on them today. Not tomorrow. Today. Make the call, bring the tea, sit with them for an hour. That's what this story was always about. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about the person in your life who deserved more than they got. And subscribe, so the next story finds you. I'll see you in the next one.